Just before the Civil War, near a community known as Knob Fork, about 7 miles from Littleton in Wetzel County, a log house was built. The house consisted of 3 large rooms, with the end room and middle room both having large open fireplaces. In later years, an upper story was built over top of the log house. Sometime during the Civil War, a poor boundary jumper, who did not believe in the Confederate cause, came north on a horse and made his way into the small community. Some of the people in the community provided food and lodging for a few nights for him and his horse. One day, the horse was found roaming around with the bridle and saddle still on, but the man was never seen or heard from again. And since the horse had been found near this old house where no one was living at the time, some feared that he had been murdered and his body hidden nearby. Soon after, people who were passing by the house in the evenings told of hearing screams and moans and other strange sounds. Often, riders would have to get off and lead their horses until they were well past the house, because the horses kept neighing and trying to turn back. If a dog were along, it kept as close to its master as possible, whether the man was riding or walking. Often, horses would stop to drink from the stream that came down from the house and ran along the side of the road. When they walked into the ditch, the water seemed to turn red as they lifted their hoofs. Later, when the Strasburg family purchased the house and moved in, they heard strange noises during the day and evening, as if a body were being dragged across the floor of the upstairs. One time, Miss Strasburg's niece was visiting, and a young fellow from around those parts was calling on her. As they sat in front of a blazing fire in the middle room, the girl heard a clicking noise, and when she looked at the door, she saw that the latch was going up and down. She was so frightened she couldn't move at first. When she did, she let out a scream and ran up the stairs and hid behind her aunt's bed. According to the family, the young man never did any more courting in that house. Another time, Miss Strasburg's mother came to spend the night with her daughter, and slept in a room over the old log part of the home. The next night, her daughter asked her how she had slept. She said, "Fine, up until about 12 o'clock, when I woke up with a feeling that a cold hand was being passed over my face. Looking around, I could see a hand moving away into the shadows." She had planned to stay the next night, but was called home. In addition to all these things, the Strasburg family was not able to keep the quilts on their bed at night. No matter how well or how often they pulled up the covers, they kept sliding to the foot. Also, there was a certain place in the floor in the back room downstairs that had the appearance of blood, and in spite of all the scrubbing and scraping they did, they were never able to get rid of it. After a couple of years, the Strasburgs put the farm up for sale. There was one good point about owning this property, and that was it had a wonderful well of water. It had never been known to go dry. In those days, that meant something to a Wetzel County farmer and his family. After the house had sat vacant for a couple of years, Russell Donaldson next bought the farm, against his family's wishes. They didn't move into the house right away, but planted corn and other crops in the fields. Often, on coming to the place in late afternoon, they could hear moaning and sometimes something like a scream. But on going into the house, would find no one or nothing. One time, the 2 older boys went into the house to nail up the door that led from the large middle room downstairs into the back room and refused to stay shut. They took a large plank and nailed it with spike nails. They thought surely they would never have any more trouble with it and turned to leave. Just before they reached the door leading to the outside, they heard the sound of splitting wood, and looking back into the room, they saw the plank board had split right down the middle. The door was slowly swinging back open. Late that spring, the Donaldson family moved into the house, the father assuring them it was all a lot of nonsense about the noises, and the idea of the house being haunted was ridiculous. One evening, while in the front room, they heard sounds as if a lot of chickens were fluttering underneath the hearth. That happened so many times that when autumn fell, Russell consented to let the two older brothers take up the fireplace, but they found nothing but a straight razor underneath. One fall night, after a hard day of harvesting, everyone was sitting on the outside porch, relaxing. Extending from the porch, there was a little place where the roof went out over the well. As the family sat there quietly, the silence was broken by what sounded like a shot, and the bullet seemed to whiz past and bounce down into the water of the well. Often in the night, when the family was upstairs sleeping, they would be awakened by a crashing sound, as if every dish in the kitchen cupboard had fallen to the floor. But when they checked, they would find everything in order, the dishes just as they had been put away, not one broken. The two older brothers made the log room in the back into a blacksmith shop, and some days they couldn't keep the bellows going at all. Some lady, who had known about the boundary jumper's disappearance, told the Donaldsons that if they would take up the fireplace in the back log room, they would have no more trouble. They did, and found a pair of old boots. Sometimes, while in the back shop, the two brothers heard a sound like the dropping of money, and would stoop to pick it up, but there would be none to be found. After some years had passed, Russell took sick and died, and the family got rid of the farm. In the early 20th century, a large pipeline went through this farm, and while some of the laborers camped on a part of it, the house caught fire, and all of it burned but the back room and the chimney. Even then, people still told of the bizarre sounds they could hear as they went by, and for many years, it was known as the Old Burnt House. Sometime later, someone put in a field of crops on the place and dug the old foundation up. Some said they found an old daybook, but it was so old and rotten, no one could read it. After this, the ghost never came back, so far as anyone knew.